Big idea is 1.4, multiplying integers. Is the product of two integers positive, negative, or zero? So we're going to go ahead and talk about the multiplicative identity. So the multiplicative identity is 1. It means any number times 1 and gives you that same original number. So 32 times 1 is 32. 4 times 2 divided by 2, or 2 halves, is 4. 2 over 2 is another way to write 1 or any other fraction where the numerator and the denominator are equal. Is another way to write 1, which is the multiplicative identity. The multiplicative inverse is when you flip the number over and you multiply it by the original number and you get 1. So 2 over 1 times 1/2 will give you 1. 4 over 1 times 1/4, its inverse, will also give you 1. All right, so using exponents. Using exponents when you are doing multiplication. So the important thing to remember is the number, the exponent symbol is how many times a number is repeated. So 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2, so that's 1, 2, 3 times. And 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. If you see it where the parentheses is inside, that means, where the negative symbol is inside the parentheses, then that means that negative symbol is also repeated. So in this case, it is -2 times -2 times -2, which would be -2 times -2 is +4, times a -2 will then make it a -8 if the negative is included. If you see it where the negative is not included, the negative is just to the side, there are no parentheses, that means you're multiplying 2 times 2 times 2 3 times as indicated, because there's 3 2's, but then you're multiplying it by a -1 at the end. So the negative is not included, it is added at the end. It is the negative of the multiplicative identity. It is an invisible one. We don't put that there's times a -1 there, but we should know it's there because there is not included in the parentheses. And for multiplying same signs, you should have positive. So a positive times a positive gives you a positive product, and a negative times a negative gives you a positive product. Conversely, if the signs are not the same, then they will give you a negative product. And if you have more than 2 multipliers, you need to pay attention to the number of negatives. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer will end up being positive. But if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer will end up being negative. So let's go ahead and do a couple of sample problems right here. All right. So let's do a couple sample problems to see how well we're doing with multiplying integers. So let's see here. How about if we did let's see, 4 times 11. So we have 4 times 11. And we'll say they're both in parentheses here. So that's the same as 4 times 11, which gives us 44. So this is what we're used to, regular multiplication. So what about if I had a -1 times a -9? When you see the 2 parentheses side by side, it means to multiply. So that's the same as a -9, a -1 times a -9. Well, you have a negative times a negative. The signs are the same, which means your answer is going to be a +9. Okay, same signs, your answer is going to be positive, right? The product will be positive. All right, what about this one? What about 12 times a -2? 12 times a -2. Well, the signs are not the same. This one is positive times this one is negative. The integer signs are not the same. So you would get 24 and it would be a negative because 2 times 12 is 24. The signs are opposite, they're different. And so opposite signs or different signs are negative. What if we had more than one? What if we had, say, a negative 10 times a negative 5 times a 0? Well, anything times 0 is 0. So without even having to deal with the signs, I can look at this and say, well, anything times 0 is 0. Okay, and then how about something like this? When I have a negative 5 times a negative 2 times a negative 1. So looking at this, I have 3, so I have an odd number, and I said that an odd number gives us a negative. Odd number of negatives gives us a negative, because negative 5 times a negative 2 gives us a positive 10, but then I multiply that by the negative 1, and I get a negative 10, because these signs are opposite. So a negative 10 for that one. All right, let's go ahead and do some exponent problems. So for some exponent problems, what if I have a negative 2 to the second power and it's included? So this would be like saying negative 2 times a negative 2. There's two negative 2's. Negative times a negative is a positive, and it would be a positive 4. What if I had something like this? Negative 5 to the second power. So in this case, it is not included, and it would be like saying 5 times 5, because there's two 5's, and then times that invisible negative 1, right? So you would get 5 times 5 is 25, times a negative 1 would be a negative 25. And then lastly, say we had a negative 4 with parentheses to the third power. That would be like saying negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. Well, there's negative times a negative is a positive 16 times a negative 4. So we have a positive times a negative. So we're going to have a negative, and it's going to be a negative 64.